because things can be completely horrific. Like, for example, we had a cancer scare with my then 6-week-old son, who's now just, a thriving 9-year-old. But at the time I was a breastfeeding mom, and it was this horrific experience of like, they think he's going to die. We don't know what it is. And I'm sitting in the hospital just through my tears, but I'm a breastfeeding mom. And I realize I need to eat and I can order off the menu. And I look down and through my tears and I realize I can order Fruit Loops, like Fruit Loops, which is like, a sugary cereal, just so not delicious. Well, sugary cereal, so not healthy, nutritious. And the first words or thoughts that came to me was like, I can't eat this. And then it's not healthy for me and my body and his body. But the second wave of thoughts came, but Jen, this is soul nourishing. This is going to bring you joy. And for that little moment in that window that I did order the Fruit Loops, which I acknowledge I only ordered it that day, but it got me out of my state of sadness. It got me out of my state of despair, in which I was actually able to feel, yes, joy, even a little bit, but it got me into a state of consciousness where I was more available to advocate for my son in the manner that he needed me to. Because, I don't know if you've been in a medical emergency situation, but I'm sure someone listening, the doctors offer their best advice, but at the end of the day, you have to make the decisions. And I had to make really tough decisions of whether or not to do this test, this scan, this, blood transfusion. Like, that was heartbreaking to make that decision that I just gave birth to this child 6 weeks ago. And I have to decide whether or not someone else's blood goes in him. Well, he needed the blood, and I needed to be in a state of clarity to answer that. So all this to say, we actually ended up coming out of the hospital after 12 excruciating days. And yet what I talk about the Fruit Loop moments, I looked for those as much as I possibly could, because that moved me into the state of consciousness to be available to make clear, sound decisions, including reaching out to friends and family. Please pray. Like, I'd never asked for prayers ever before in my life. And I moved into a new state of being. I mean, I also joke that this is when my life coaching shifted into spiritual life coaching, and yet realized that we actually got out of there with a medical mystery diagnosis. He never got fully diagnosed. And they actually said, we think he's a medical miracle. And we've not had any issues since. And so that was such a dark hour for myself and my family. But I was still able to find what I call the little joys. And that truly was our path out of that hole. So we're actually in a greater state of availability to intuitive thoughts, creativity, imagination, and then attractiveness to resources, to people, to opportunities. And we're able to see them. Because when we're in a lower state of consciousness of despair and upset and frustration, look, we all have crummy life circumstances, but those are all opportunities to grow through, which I know you teach your clients as well, that it's either you can relate to it as a victim, or you can relate to it as an opportunity to grow through and to grow out into and move forward through.
I think so. I think what probably most of us have at least a minimal capacity to be able to think is this will not last forever. So even if we don't have all of the answers, we're able to say to ourselves, okay, I've just got to get through this, or something else which is relatively positive. And I do find that typically with executives, they do in general have an extremely constructive problem-solving type of brain. But I think along with that comes some other very strong qualities. And one of them is this principle of being an adrenaline junkie. And part of the beauty of that is they're often very excited, very excitable. And this is what gets them out of bed, drives their day, makes them achieve. That's all the good side to it. But the downside is often they do something or achieve something, and yet they don't stop to breathe, pause, or I know that you would use the word perhaps find peace. All it really does is say, okay, job done, now let's go on to the next one. And there's some difficulty I've got with that, which I want to try and express, because I don't intentionally mean to judge people, but I do think there's some issue where you and I are compatible in our thinking around just pausing at that point. Just breathe, just say to yourself, great, and take whatever it is. a minimum of a day, a few days would be really great, just to calibrate. Hey, I've got there, or I've got something. And that in itself is an achievement. That's taking joy on the journey with you, I think.